The rand is up at the start of a data-heavy week that includes the government's midterm budget statement. In early trade, the rand traded at around 18 rand 79 cents against the dollar. Trader and the founder of Herenya Capital Advisors, Petri Redelinghuys, joins us now for a market update. A very good morning to you. Thank you for your time. The rand strengthened slightly last week, but remained largely volatile on unfavorable global conditions. How is it faring so far today?
Good morning. Well, sorry, good afternoon, I suppose. So far so good. I guess we're off to a slightly better start this week. I think what we're seeing and we're probably likely to see for the next coming weeks, I want to say a couple of weeks, but I don't know, it could be longer, right? We've seen how these things tend to drag out. But essentially, I'm going to draw a few parallels here. When the conflict in the Ukraine kind of erupted for the first time, we saw a similar phenomenon to what we're seeing now, obviously with the conflict in Israel being the fresh new thing to keep everybody, glued to their televisions. Mm-hmm. Essentially, what happens is on Fridays, the market doesn't really want to take over weekend risk, if that makes sense. So we see equity markets kind of sell off on Fridays. We see risk currencies being sold off as well. So things like the rand, for example, generally not performing very well as we head into the weekend because everybody's kind of taking this position of, well, we have no idea what happens over the weekend. Potentially there's an escalation and, we don't want to have this risk that, if the markets open on Monday and the war had expanded or spread or, more countries got involved or whatever the case is, that we're going to be in a bad position. So everybody just kind of gets rid of risk heading into the weekend, right? Mm. So I think we saw a fair amount of that at the end of last week. And so far this week, it seems to be off to a better start. So the rand is a little bit stronger at 18 rand 80 to the US dollar. So that's around 1/10 of a percent stronger. The top 40 index is up around 0.6 of 1% as well. Gold price is down by around 0.5%. The oil price is down by around 0.7 of 1%. So it seems that it was a largely peaceful weekend, I suppose. I guess take that with a pinch of salt, but there was no real escalation of tensions over the weekend, and the market is feeling a little more confident to start the week. So, and as you said, it's quite a data-heavy week that lies ahead. So I think it'll probably be a little bit you see a bit of sort of headline-to-headline trading, if you will. But for now, the market seems all right, provided that the wheels don't fall off the bus and, the world doesn't take big steps backwards during the course of this week. Mm. We should be okay. The market really did have a very tough time last week. And I think that if you do look at the sort of medium-term trends, a lot of the trends that we've put in place since the beginning of the year, we've had a bit of a tough time, during essentially 2022, which seems to have mostly reversed and was looking a bit better this year. Now, as we enter into the final phase of this year, it seems as though those uptrends that were established in the beginning of this year are under a bit of pressure or under threat, and we probably head lower into the sort of the finality of the year. However, we know the markets don't necessarily move in straight lines, so I expect that the markets will probably be a little bouncy, somewhat stronger this week, at least for the first half, until we see some of the data potentially later this week come under the party.
Grin Rod Bank faces a 100 million rand lawsuit over alleged failure to report fraud. What's it looking like with developments in that space?
So this is not really something I understand, and I'm quite curious to see how this plays out or what, as more information emerges here. But from what I understand is that they bought over, they did some payroll financing, right? So this is something that banks do, I suppose, and other lending businesses where you do invoice financing or payroll financing where, so look, let's say, for example, I'm the company in question here. I've got some expenses that I can't really afford to pay, but I've issued all these invoices and I'm expecting my customers to pay me. So the bank will then advance me cash, and when the invoices are paid, then, I give the money straight back over to the bank. So they did a deal with a human resources firm to the tune of 8.2 million rand in 2017, as far as I know. And, the bank gave them the cash up front, on the back of these outstanding invoices. and the invoices didn't exist from what I could tell. So the bank lost a couple of $1 million. Now, to be fair, 8.2 million rand for a bank isn't really a lot of money, but they should have reported this and they didn't. So I'm not 100% sure what the story is here, but there was obviously, a fraud taking place here. The company was called Nat Industries, is the company that defrauded the bank. And the bank never reported it. So now, as this whole thing is unraveling and more creditors are coming out the woodwork, the bank is essentially on the hook here for 100 million rand. They're being sued for 100 million rand, which is a significant amount of money, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% sure what the story is here, but I think it's definitely going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Glencore's third quarter 2023 production report. Did anything stand out for you looking at the numbers?
Well, it's actually not the worst production report in the whole wide world. If you close your eyes and ignore, the obvious, the ferrochrome production was something like 21% lower, owing to smelter off days or offline days during a 3-month high electricity demand season in South Africa, aka load shed. So it's really very sad to see how negatively companies are impacted by load shedding, particularly high energy companies, smelters, mining, minerals companies, that type of stuff. These are big contributors to our tax sort of income as a country. They are big employers as well. And almost every measure of, or every, product that they produce is down. Zinc is down 4%. Copper is down 5%. Ferrochrome is down 21%. Nickel is down 16%. Almost everything is lower. And yeah, they had some other problems as well, but the vast majority of, the output curtailment that they've had or output decrease that they've had is really at the feet of Eskom, right? So that is really very frustrating, and I think it must probably be extremely frustrating for mining companies trying to operate in this environment as well.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, not the greatest set of results, but I do think that if you look at how the market is currently trading, that it's not outside of what expectation for the production update was, at least. I think most of the investors in these companies are now fully aware of the fact that electricity is a problem and that production is going to be impacted by it. So believe it or not, the stock is up on the day by about 0.5%.
So MTN Nigeria has published its third quarter trading update. What are those numbers looking like?
So, and also not good. Jeepers, you guys got me on you picked the day with all the bad news, right? So also not really good. I mean, share price currently down around 4%, so the market really taking it very hard. Essentially, what's happening here is that their numbers are down by around 12 to 13%. So earnings per share, diluted earnings per share, there's all different ways that they skin that cat. But essentially, earnings is down around 12.8, 13% around there. And a large part of that really is to do with the devaluation of the Naira, sorry. So we do know that, earlier this year, Nigeria has essentially made a move to remove the support that they give their currency and really just push it into the space where it is a supply and demand driven currency where, the open market forces determine its value rather than central bank intervention the entire time. And this has created a lot of pain for Nigerians, actually, as their currency very, very quickly devalued. And also, that led to huge amounts of inflation as well as a large sort of spike in the energy price or oil price for them locally. So it had a big knock-on effect on their economy, from a Nigeria-only perspective. Obviously, for companies that operate in that space as well, suddenly your, the money that you have in that country devalues very, very quickly. So they're taking a bit of a massive forex loss, really. And they've had a number of, trade obligations and things that they've had to pay and settle. And all of this now essentially happening in a space where the currency has devalued a huge amount very, very quickly. So that is taking a bit of pain. However, I do think that this is a sort of a temporary situation. I think that, Nigeria is going through this transitional phase where they're opening themselves up to global trade a bit more and bringing, policies in line with that. And there is this transition period, which is kind of like pulling off the plaster. It's really sore in the beginning, but eventually, things start to heal and get better. So I do think that this is probably not an irrecoverable position for MTN, but yeah, I guess in a environment where some of their markets are potentially heading into conflict. That whole Middle East region is looking like a bit of a tinderbox.
Yeah.
Plus, they now essentially lose 12% of their earnings in Nigeria. Plus, all the other headwinds that they have. It's not looking so great for the stock. However, I do think that, the market can be a bit irrational sometimes. So probably a little bit of pain on the cards to come here in the short term, but I think it approaches a point where it's starting to make sense to own the stock.
Mm-hmm. And the AdCorp interim financial results for the 6 months ended on the 31st of August of this year are also out. Help us make sense of that performance.
So there's a little bit of good news, actually.
Yeah.
So, look, unfortunately, not the world's most liquid stock, right? It's very much a penny stock. But revenue from continuing operations up something like 10%, so that's very good. The dividend is also up to, I think it's 16.1 cents compared to the 12.2 cents last time around. So really kind of a robust set of results. Most of the metrics, most of the geographic areas really kind of doing better. So a little bit of good news, I guess, on a bleak day. However, as I mentioned, the stock is not really all that liquid. Last traded at R4.69 for 1,807 shares at 12:30. And as far as I can see, that is the only trade that has taken place today. So the market very, very thin for the share.
Okay, thank you so much. A balance of some very bad news and some good news. Thank you for that update. That was a trader and founder of Herenya Capital Advisors, Petri Redelinghuys, joining us for that market update.